Hello and welcome to Liberty Coin and Precious Metals Radio. This is Joseph, along with Mark Loneker, the president of the company. Today we'll be interviewing Trace Mayer of runtogold.com as well as howtovanish.com. So welcome, Trace. How are you today?
Great. Glad to be with you.
I noticed one of the things that's interesting about your website is that you have a quote from Dr. Edwin Vieira. And interestingly enough, we have the same quote in our office, so I think we share the same philosophy. Let me just go ahead and read this quote. Thus, the fight over gold and silver as a media of exchange is about more than mere money, let alone making money. For it is a fight with only two possible outcomes, either control of their own lives by the people themselves, or control of the people and their lives by political and economic elitists.
That's... gold and silver, it's impossible to understand sound money without understanding that they serve as bulwarks against despotic inroads on the part of governments, to quote Mises. They serve as essential checks and balances in the political machinery that we operate. In effect, they protect against confiscation through inflation, which is a form of taxation without representation and without due process of law. So when people have control over money and they have control over currency, the unit of account, the medium of exchange that's used in ordinary day-to-day transactions, they have control over the fruits of their labors. In effect, they have control over the choices that they've made in the past. And without that pillar of freedom and without that pillar of liberty, we can't really have the other pillars of liberty. For example, involuntary servitude or slavery, which is control over our choices in the present, or protection of life, which is control over the ability to make choices in the future. And we see now that despotic governments, like the United States government, for example, and the assassination of Anwar al-Awlaki, who hadn't been charged with a crime, who hadn't been convicted of a crime, there was no grand jury investigation, there was no indictment. Obama just said, "That guy, kill him," and he did. And that is the antithesis of a free and open society where people have control over themselves, over their money, and over their future. And without those things, and sound money plays a critical, even an essential role in that protection, as Dr. Vieira has outlined, that's one of the reasons why when you buy gold and silver, you buy freedom. You go long freedom and short tyranny. In effect, you're fighting every central bank in the world, and you're fighting governments too, because governments do not want people to be free. They want to exterminate freedom, and they want to turn everybody into slaves. And in order to do that, they're premised on the use of violence and the use of force in order to accomplish that. And they'll use every tool at their disposal in order to accomplish it. So when we look at gold and silver, it's not really about making money, although it's nice to do that, but it's more about he who has the gold makes the rules. And one of the reasons that we don't have the political and legal freedoms that we used to have is because, for the most part, people just don't have any gold. So they're not going to make any rules, and they're going to get treated like livestock.
Right. And I think one of the other things that's interesting is every time a government wants to go to war, they almost have to take themselves off the gold standards, because as long as they're limited to sound money, that money is going to get consumed right away. But if they have the power to print and create more money, and we see that there's more violence in the world because basically they can use all the force that they want. There's nothing holding them back at that point.
Well, yeah, I mean, what rational person is going to borrow money to build something and blow it up, and in the process blow up something else that has productive and useful value, and thus the only thing left on the balance sheet is a bunch of debt? War, and a lot of people want to say, oh, well, we got out of the Great Depression because of World War II, and that's not the case. It's been thoroughly debunked by the Austrian School of Economics.
Mm-hmm.
But war does serve the interests of people who make bombs, and it serves the interests of politicians who want to reduce the unemployment rate. And so, they're the ones who want to spend other people's money blowing up productive things. And that just, war is the perfect example of government's role. And government's role is a giant wealth destroyer. That's all they can do. They can only destroy wealth. They can't actually create any. If they could create any, then they wouldn't have to rely on violence and force to go and expropriate assets from people, and they wouldn't have to rely on confiscation through inflation, which is just an alternative form of taxation, because they have control over legal tender. And, it's an unfortunate thing, but people have allowed it to happen, and they're not standing up for their unalienable right to use what they want to use as currency, and so they're going to continue to be have their faces ground until they decide to actually stand up and do something about it. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing it start to happen, whether it's the Tea Party movement or the Occupy Wall Streets, or you look over there at the Arab Spring. I mean, the world is in commotion, and it's propelled the precious metals into forward motion like we haven't seen before in a long time.
Right. I think you can see that, there's a lot of people out there that know that something's wrong. Like, if Occupy Wall Street is a little bit off course, as well the Tea Party, I think we could both agree on that. But there is an awakening of people that realize that there's something fatally flawed in our system, and they're not able to put their hand on it. So I think, places that distribute gold and silver and then push people to actually take control of their financial situation again are pretty essential in this fight.
Yeah, and the other thing is, when you look at fiat currencies, in essence, the way you want to value them is as the common stock of those governments that issue them, as the institutions that issue them. The Eurozone, I'd short that. I'd short the Eurozone. I don't think that these politicians in Belgium really have what it takes to keep it together. Papandreou, he just booted out the top generals of the Air Force, the Army, and the Navy, and replaced them with lieutenant generals that all the other political parties in Greece are opposed to. I'd short Greece. If it's a stock, I think its charts should look more like Netflix's. And that's what we're in. We're in a cycle where the faith in government is waning, and their common stocks are falling. And they've fallen against gold. Every major currency's fallen against gold for the last 10 years. And look at the change in people's views towards government. I mean, everybody makes cracks about government. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows that they're completely incompetent and they're just destroying wealth. And everybody knows that they're just a bunch of losers that can't actually do anything productive in the real world. They can't get anybody to give them anything consensually, and so they have to go out and rape people of their money in order to sustain themselves. And people are just sick and tired, and they're fed up with it, and they're starting to buy gold and silver in response to it. Because that's how the Germans riot. They just buy gold. They've been through this before.
Right. Well, and we have, like you said, the wealth destruction. I was just reading an article recently where the average family of four here in America, for 2010, their average income was down 3.8%. And then you take the inflation, like that John Williams has at shadowstats.com for that particular year, of about 7%. And now the average family of four, no wonder they're wondering what's wrong, why they're falling behind. They're down 10%. Combining those two just in 2010, so you have you have both individuals working, sending their kids to public school. There's no way they're going to be able to send them to college at this rate, and because of the wealth destruction, the hidden inflation tax that people are starting to realize, what's wrong, what's happened to me. I mean, we're both working and we're going backwards.